I've just fitted a I-Gaging DRO system, which is the very cheapest way of providing a DRO to a lathe like this, and I've previously only ever had what you might call proper DRO systems, and there are some drawbacks to doing it this way, but it is certainly usable and a heck of a lot better than having nothing at all. The I-Gaging DROs come as one unit with the cables attached and another unit with the cables attached. In the UK there's only one source for buying them that I could find, and they only seem to do one size, which is 6 inches, which is absolutely perfect for this in both directions. So that's what I went with. I'll just move the handle. You can see in the X direction increasing and decreasing. I haven't set the center position yet, I'll show you that in a minute, and that's moving down the Z. So if I 0, for example, and I set up on that particular point and then advance in 10 millimeters. I've just gone past it. So it's certainly very much better than having nothing at all, and I think it's certainly quite helpful. Now, if you want to set the X, there's two things to bear in mind. First of all, this is only working on a radius basis, and when you're working with a normal DRO, you really want the thing to be set up so that you're reading a diameter. So first thing I do is to measure the stock. How if I switched it on? Approximately 10 millimeters. So if I wind this in to the point where it's just starting to touch, and then if I 0 it at that point, if I want to set this to the center, I measure the diameter of this, which is 10 millimeters. It's just a little bit different, but say for argument's sake it's 10 millimeters. And the X axis I've set up on the top and the Z on the bottom. So if you press the 0 button, so that's got that zeroed on the outside of the stock. Now if you wind in 5 millimeters, spend a bit of time setting that up exactly on 5 millimeters. And then 0 it again, that means that your cutter is sitting exactly in the center of the axis. So if you move this back to 5 millimeters, because this is reading on the radius rather than the diameter, you have to remember when you're doing it that every time you make an adjustment it needs halving or doubling, depending which way you're looking at it. So if you're turning something now that you want to turn this down to 4 millimeters, you don't set this to 4, because if you set that to 4 and then turn it in, it takes off 1 millimeter on this side and 1 millimeter on this side. If you want it 4 millimeters, you have to remember, so 5 to 4.5. So 4.5 is taking half a millimeter off each side. That's the way I look at it, and that would then get you to 9 millimeters. So having got that clear in your head, it's actually quite easy to use this. And certainly, as I say, it's heaps better than having nothing at all. I don't want to spend too long labouring it, but I thought I'd just mention that. There is a way of setting numbers with, rather than going and centering the way I did. The way the system allows you to do that is to press the preset button, and then it allows you to change each number in a complicated sequence as you go down, and if you make a mistake anywhere you can't go back again, that I could discover. It's not very easy to do, and I don't know why they did that feature, because it would be much better to have had a diameter based and radius based switch rather than worrying about trying to preset the numbers. But anyway, that's what it is. It is what it is, and it's clear, easy to read, and seems reasonably accurate. Fixing it onto my lathe was an interesting job in itself, so I'll move back and show you what I did. This is the Z-axis slide, and the way I fixed this on was to use the outside of these two, where these two screws go through, so that I haven't had to drill anything into the original lathe at all. So this sits secured by those two screws, and then I made up a block here to fasten this block to, which then sits onto this block, which is in turn fastened to the two spare screws that went through for measuring the distance on the original lathe. So those are original holes, and I was keen to make it as able to be fitted with as little alteration to the lathe as possible. So no alteration there. Now I need to get to the other end. You can see it best if I bring this up here. And that's the end of the slide, and it sits, which is fastened to this block here, which in turn is fastened to that plate, and that plate is only secured by these two screws at the end. So all of that has involved no extra drilling to the lathe, fixing to the lathe at all. It's all fixed to the things that I've added. Now the X-axis is a little bit more difficult to do, also more difficult to film. So if I go under here, you can see there's the slide going from one end to the other, and that is fastened to a hole drilled into this end of the cross slide, and the other end, it's also fastened to a hole in the cross slide. The top block here has just got two screws fastened at the back through a plate at the behind here. That plate there, the back plate, back part of it, is secured to this block. So it only required screws at this end, at the far end, and in the middle. So it was relatively easy to fit, but getting it so it lines up square and doesn't drag on the lathe while it's moving to and fro is a key thing. So that's my simple I-Gaging DRO setup, which I don't really see, given that it only cost just under £100, how you could improve on that. I've got other systems in the workshop here which cost £300 and £400, but this is certainly good enough to be able to make the lathe much more usable. The lathe now, with ability to cut threads in imperial and metric, and to have power feed and to have a DRO makes this quite a modern lathe, even though it was built in 1890. So that's the end of what I'll be doing on the Lorch Lathe, and I must just do a little bit more on the cutter grinder before I get back to the clock.